is one rough neighborhood. The guys on this side and the guys on the other side of the road now, they're always at war. This is Maxfield, and over this side now is Greenwich Town. Right in the heart of Black Corner. You see pictures on the wall. These are guys who are gone. Dead.
Where's the recording studio?
First time you're a driver?
Yeah.
Okay, you'd have to park down here and the studio is this way. You'd have to walk up this way. Oh, you have equipment? Okay.
Music has always been a big part of my life. I grew up in Kansas City in the 1950s. My parents were big band fans. They used to go out and dance to the Dorsey Brothers, Count Basie, Duke Ellington. My grandfather gave me my first cornet when I was 6, and my dad played harmonica, and so I was around music all my youth. In high school, I got involved with some local bands, playing at various shows and small parties. Whenever we could, we would try to catch as many live shows as possible. We got an opportunity to see a lot of these acts that would come through this Chitlin circuit. And James Brown used to come to the Kansas City Memorial Auditorium every year. And in this case, there was like 4 other acts before James ever hit the stage. When he did hit, it was like a firebomb hitting a haystack, and the place just exploded. It literally broke into a riot. There were bottles flying and this pandemonium. That was a turning point for me in realizing the power of music. In 1970, I went out to Newport Beach, California, and visited some friends of mine.
In the late 60s and early 70s, California was the place to be in America for music. Music ruled the landscape, and the most important artists of the time came out of San Francisco and Los Angeles.
San Francisco had just experienced their Summer of Love, and Southern California was getting into a grittier kind of rock and roll. This music scene was very inspiring to me, and to be around live music is something that I felt like I needed to do to feed my musical soul. So I went back to Kansas City, packed up everything, and headed out to the West Coast. I bounced around for a while and ended up living at Eric Morton's infamous Morton Mansion, which served as a mecca for creative people in the Laguna Beach area.
It was one of the biggest houses in town, so it had lots of rooms in it. And I lived off in a room on the side, and the guitar player lived off in a room on the side. Jack was living in his camper on the street below, and basically the whole band lived there.
There was Theo Blomberg, an exceptional drummer who had been working in the Ray Charles studios in Los Angeles, an English guitarist, Peter Dobson, who became my songwriting partner, and Eric Morton played bass.
California is kind of an island, especially in the reggae world. For many of us, discovering reggae was based on 2 things. The release of The Harder They Come, this extraordinary film shot in the ghettos of Kingston, which revealed some of the finest artists to the outside world, people like Toots and the Maytals and Jimmy Cliff. And an article in Rolling Stone by a gonzo journalist from Australia named Michael Thomas, who wrote, "Reggae music crawls into your bloodstream like some vampire amoeba from the psychic rapids of Upper Niger consciousness." And I said, I don't know what that means, but I gotta find it right now.
Back then, nobody really knew what reggae was, and Jack had all these reggae records and all this stuff, and he'd introduce these songs to us.
We would go to every live show we could. we heard that Bob Marley and the Wailers were playing at the Santa Barbara County Bowl. Seeing Bob Marley on stage with the Wailers was like having a shaman transport you to another level of consciousness.
Seeing what he did to that crowd of people, like, it's just so powerful, you know? It was political, it was spiritual.
Bob had this charisma. He would literally cast a spell over the audience.
Like a whole 2-hour set, every single person was on their feet. Everybody.
I'd already heard the music, and I knew what I was in for. But I wasn't really ready for his physical presence, his body language. It was pretty overwhelming.
When he danced, it was a weird, broken marionette dance like I'd never seen before. The audience would just shriek and scream.
The whole place was just rocking to that feeling of, you know, the reggae thing. He had it.
And that's when I knew reggae was going to be a big part of my life.
Calypso was always there first. From there now it developed to people start ching, 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 ching for ska, you know. And then for rocksteady it's like jing, jing, jing. For reggae now it's check, it check, it check, you know. So you have 3 different feelings.
After 400 years of colonialism and oppression, the Jamaicans looked back to Africa to find their heritage. They began to question the political and the religious sides of what had been imposed upon them. That's what fueled much of reggae's message.
In our time, a revolution thing. You understand? So the music was like the teaching. You understand? We don't go out there, go demonstrate and try. You know what I mean? We use the music.
We have been preaching peace and love and anti-ism. We, the musicians of the Caribbean, had something militant to say against the colonialization of all those Caribbean countries. And this is the potency that we talk about with our music. We were the only ones who were saying it's 96 degrees in the shade when they hung the slave.
Write a song about it. Natural, this is just the voice, this is the trumpet, this is the sound. You understand? Because we don't have nothing else. As we said, the music become our weapon.
In 1962, Jamaica achieved its independence at last from the British, and there was a conscious effort on the part of the new government and the musicians in Jamaica to create something uniquely Jamaican.
Since 1959, the west end of Kingston, Jamaica has throbbed with a musical beat, a hypnotic sound of surging excitement and power. People hearing it became caught up in a frenzy and couldn't help moving to this pulsating, almost religious beat. This is ska.
In the Caribbean in the 40s and 50s, there was a prime form of music that infiltrated most of the other islands. It began in Trinidad. It was called calypso. There was a slight variation on it in Jamaica they called mento.
Mento then developed into ska, which was more up-tempo. They decided to slow down the tempo, which then became the transition between ska and reggae.
Toots Hibbert and his band have been together since 1963. Basically the same musicians playing through all the transitions in Jamaican music.
We were club musicians. From time to time we go on tours with various artists like Toots or Jimmy Cliff or whoever. And just coming out of the 60s, you had the likes of Bob Marley, the Wailers, going on their own. At that point in time, when more Rastas became involved in the music and they started preaching the message.
Rasta is a way of life. Sacred to be a Rasta. It's the love that you have within you and the way of life it is. You know, the hairstyle is what you call him dread.
Dread is the person who have the ear. So you don't have to have ear to be a Rasta. It's from your heart.
The beat of reggae is the beat of the healthy human heart at rest. It's that heartbeat, that womb-like rhythm that is irresistible. Probably the finest exponent of that run-drop reggae rhythm was Carly Barrett and his brother, family man Barrett, the bass player.
I and my brother, yes, we rehearse, practice among ourselves. Drum and bass. You know, that's where we get the first incense from that vibe, you know? Get down to earth frequency. Music rise from the bottom to the mid to the top. 5 of us. Bob Marley, Buddy Livingston, Peter Touch, my brother Carlton Barrett, and myself, Aston Family Man Barrett.
Bob's message was very much one love. I think he always wanted to bring people together, actually unite people through song and dance. From a ghetto perspective, ghetto roots perspective, with Rasta, you know.
The whole mission he had in life was to bring the message of Rastafari to the masses.
After seeing Bob Marley and the Wailers, I had become this reggae believer, and we decided to put together a band that was going to play reggae. So Eric Morton, Peter Dobson, and Teo Blomberg and I put together Orange County's first reggae rock band, the Roots Band.
During the Roots Band, that was the time when Jack got into reggae and got us into it.
We loved reggae, but we didn't really know how to play it like the Jamaicans did, so we played our version of it.
We were just a bunch of Laguna Beach surf rockers that got all revved up on reggae.
The Roots Band was getting notoriety, and we were starting to play around, and we actually were starting to really play reggae.
So there we were, a bunch of white guys in Republican, conservative Orange County playing reggae music, and people would just look at us, they didn't know what to make of us.
Jack became very single-minded, I think, at a certain point, getting more and more into reggae, and so much did that become his point of focus that he actually wanted to go to Jamaica and record with the great Jamaican musicians.
I had to go to Kingston. I had to meet these musicians. I had to work with these people who were putting this stuff out. Going to Jamaica required a leap of faith. I didn't know anybody in Jamaica. All I knew was the information that I had gotten on the back of the album covers.
Fire flashes in the southern skies, November nights are warm down here.
I landed in Montego Bay, which is a beautiful tropical paradise, but it's really a tourist area. So I called up Channel 1 Recording Studios and booked a recording session. Montego Bay was great, but I needed to get to the other side of the island where the recording studios are in Kingston. So I decided to take the train. And on that train, I get inspired to write a song called Night Train to Kingston.
The big light shines through the jungle tonight. For the laughs and jokes, we share a smoke.
When we arrived in Kingston, I felt a sense of urgency. You feel it as soon as you enter the city limits.
To go into some of these studios in the heart of the ghetto was a very risky proposition. This was a time of tremendous political upheaval, and just getting to the studios, you'd have to cross several different lines controlled by the various political parties.
The night of the recording session, I take a cab down to Channel 1. As we go through Kingston, we start getting into something that I realize is not a very nice part of town. And it dawned on me that this is why reggae music is so powerful. Much of the fuel that has driven reggae has come up through the ghetto. So the cabbie drops me off at this address, and it's a motorcycle shop. So I was kind of wondering, well, is this the famous Channel 1 recording studios? I didn't see anything. I kind of looked around, and there's a little light in the back, and I walk around, and I see this giant iron gate. So I walk up, and there's a guy behind the gate, and I say, yeah, I'm Jack Miller. I've got this recording session. And he looks at me, then he opens the gate. And it was like being transported into a musical sanctuary. Channel 1 recording studios. There was this old recording console. There was a B3 in one corner. There were some drums in the back. There's a grand piano, and I sat down at the piano and started playing Night Train to Kingston. And I look up from the piano, and there was Sly Dunbar, Robbie Shakespeare, and the rest of the revolutionaries. And they look at me, and I look at them. And then they look at me, and I look at them. And there was this moment of uncomfortable silence. And then Robbie Shakespeare goes, "Hey, wagwan, man. What's going on, man?" I start pounding out the changes. When I'm halfway through the song, something clicked. Sly took his drums. Robbie grabs his bass. Everybody took their places. And this 7-piece rhythm section kicks in. And suddenly, my dream comes alive.
My music is just music. It's a message decorated with music for the awakening of people's consciousness onto certain levels of reality. But it has such a powerful spiritual ingredients that it drives away evil. See? So because I know that, I sing it.
Back in Laguna Beach, after this life-changing musical experience in Jamaica, we put together a new group to play this authentic Jamaican music that I was bringing back.
We play music all day, go out, do gigs at night, go to the recording studio, live in the studio for 2 weeks at a time. So it was like a musical family. We could take chances when we were playing music. We knew how each other thought. When we were on stage, every song was different every night.
The big light shines through the jungle tonight. For the laughs and jokes, we share a smoke.
And the Friends Band had almost too much talent, too many directions. But when the band would play live, it was absolutely wonderful.
I see the people moving right. Time riding home that night train, riding home the night train to Kingston, riding home the night train, riding home the night train to Kingston.
So the Friends Band was playing many styles of music, blues, R&B, gospel, some jazz. And Jack became much more interested in doing just reggae and really formed the Rebel Rockers so that he could have a band that would be completely dedicated to that style of music.
Basically, all we needed was a great female vocalist, and that's when we met Deborah.
Marty Dread, you know, run. I was being courted by Redlocks Morton. I was his girlfriend. Redlocks been involved with Peter and Jack for many years before I came on the scene. And I moved into the house. And somebody pulled me out into rehearsal one day.
And we invited her down to sing some backup with us and stuff. So she was real shy about it. She didn't think she could do it.
And the next thing I know, we've got a gig.
We should be dancing in a new land. Yeah. We will be loving in love again.
And then we're getting phone calls, and we got more gigs.
The Rebel Rockers had this wonderful, raw, churning energy. It was so powerful. It was so strongly rhythmic. In fact, Deborah was more or less the dance instructor for the people who came to those shows because they learned to dance by imitating the movements that she made.
I think the people were anxious to hear us because with Jack's songs and other reggae songs, there's a lot of political motivation in the lyrics and things. So the people really got behind it. I think they could relate to the message that we were giving out. I think they were hungry for it.
You know the winds of change are blowing tonight. Burning, 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 Kingston. Burning, burning, fire. Burning, burning, Kingston. Burning, burning, fire.
We were playing this music that we had interpreted from these recordings that I had brought up from Jamaica.
Because we had been working on and vibing and playing reggae music in California, we needed to touch base, touch with the homeland to really understand it.
So I took 17 people from the Laguna Beach area, including various members of the Friends Band and the Rebel Rockers, with me to Jamaica.
It was New Year's Eve, 1979, a night flight to Kingston.
As soon as we got to where we were going, the first thing Eric did was try to score some local herb. And he did.
'Cause I'm the Bacalolo man. I'm the Bacalolo man. When y'all's in need, call on me. 'Cause I'm the Bacalolo man. I'm the Bacalolo man. When y'all's in need, call on me.
It just so happened that as we were scheduled to go into our recording studio in Channel 1, there was these riots going on over the gas prices.
And now we have to get to Channel 1 in Kingston, record, and make it to our flight the next morning. And the place is frozen in conflict. It's almost martial law. In fact, it was martial law. Large groups of people were stopping cars and turning them over. There were military police and armed personnel on every corner. There was tear gas and things on fire, people running, throwing rocks. That's what was going on.
So there was roadblocks everywhere. They're stopping everyone, not letting people through and turning them back and things. But we just tell them, we're musicians. And they go, yeah, man, go ahead. Put us right through.
Since we were carrying musical instruments, we were treated almost as though we were the Red Cross. We were writing the lyrics to these songs, Crisis and Kingston is Burning, right up to the last minute. You didn't have to be too clever to write that lyric. You know, you just looked around you. You know, there's a crisis. Yeah, I think there is, you know.
We arrived at Channel 1, and there was Sly and Robbie, Doogie Bryant, Ansel Collins, and the legendary Chinna Smith on guitar. These people became big influences on us in terms of how we perceived the music and how we included it in what we were doing as musicians.
I was able to really see where the birth of this came from.
I mean, working in the recording studio with Sly Dunbar sitting right next to me, and I was playing percussion, he was playing drums. I learned a lot about reggae drumming right there because he's the best.
It's about the bass and drums. You know, it's like these people are weaving a sound together.
It wasn't just the straight downbeat, upbeat thing, you know, there was a lot of syncopation going on.
Somehow the all-night session gets done. We'd recorded our tracks, everybody's happy, and we go over to King Tubby's to get a mix of these songs. All of the music went through a wah-wah pedal on the dance mix, I remember that. It was brilliant. We go directly from Tubby's to Federal Records and signed a contract for the release of the record. So we went directly from the studio to the mixing room to the pressing plant, signed the deal for the record. Everybody piles back into vehicles, all these people with their luggage and everything, all on no sleep at all, makes it over to the airport and get back on their flight to California.
Back in 1979, there was a new magazine that had just started called the LA Weekly. I went down to their little tiny offices and said, I've heard about a guy down in Dana Point in Orange County who calls himself Surfin' Jack Miller, who plays reggae music and who's actually been to Jamaica recording with some of the great artists down there. And I'd like to do a story about him. And they said, sure, go on down. And I began to see how important his work was to exposing reggae music to an audience that had never encountered it before.
So we go from a time when there's almost no live reggae to be found unless you were to go to Jamaica, to a time when there's a reggae band on every street corner in every club, and there are radio stations and newspapers and so on. And Jack Miller was very much responsible for bringing reggae music to Southern California.
Jack was trying to bring a rock and roll sensibility into reggae music with an Americanized sound without losing the roots and without losing the consciousness of the lyric. Most reggae music in the early days was 2.5 to 3.5 minute pop singles, and Jack did extended compositions. He kind of brought that style to the attention of Jamaican musicians, which was an interesting cross-pollination, which goes on to this day.
It was 1980, and I was headed back to Jamaica to do some recording with the Wailers and the Third World Band at Bob Marley's new studio, Tough Gong.
Just like a mighty dread. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Play in the R&B. Yeah. I want all my people to see. Shoot, shoot, shoot.
The reggae music community really fosters a sense of this extended musical family. At this point, I was really feeling like I was a part of the reggae community.
The Honorable Robert Nesta Marley Bob, O.M., Order of Merit, the most widely acclaimed Jamaican musician ever, died of cancer Monday. His loss was undoubtedly one of the saddest events of recent times.
On Tuesday, September 23rd at the Stanley Theatre, he did the final show of his life. The band didn't know that he was that ill, and the audience certainly didn't know.
We're here at MacArthur Park at a tribute to one of the greatest artists of the century.
I would say that if anyone here in the park cares about reggae, it is likely that you care about it because of Bob Marley. One of the things that is most important to reggae in Los Angeles is this sense of community and brotherhood that we see here today.
Bob Marley's untimely death stopped the momentum that reggae music had been building.
There was a pause because we had to mourn Bob, you know.
His music was just so profound and such a great influence that everyone was just happy that he had been here and gave us that music.
There was this uncertainty and a lot of denial about where the music was going. What else could we do but continue to play the music and spread the message? Since 1975, I had been in these different reggae rock bands, but none of them had a real authentic Jamaican rhythm section. Tony Chin, Fully Fullwood, and Tenor Grant moved to the West Coast. And since we were all living there, it became a perfect opportunity to blend the authentic Jamaican sound with the California style.
We had done our imitation and brought what we could to it, and it was a sort of a fusion. But with the All-Stars, we kind of went to school with Tony and Fully and Chili, and I think we began to play the music, as it were, in our minds at least properly, playing it from the ground up the way it ought to be played.
You needed to see this music live and experience it on a personal level. Then you got it. In 1982, many members of the reggae community began to reconnect with one another to keep the music alive.
Reggae teacher, yeah. Talking about skip, Bob Marley. Whoa, whoa.
I returned to Kingston, Jamaica to record the Reggae Preacher sessions with Junior Marvin and Big Youth. Big Youth has always been one of the innovators of reggae music. He came on with this style and charisma and has influenced everybody from Bob Marley to the earliest American rap artist with this DJ style of singing.
Speak the truth and speak it ever, cost it what it will. It's not a national move, it's an international move, right, sir?
With the reggae community in Jamaica beginning to revitalize itself, I headed back to California, where a new generation of reggae fans was emerging.
Early to mid 80s, reggae music was taken in Southern California by storm. When reggae music came in, it not only brought the music, but it brought in this culture, what I like to call a conscious revolution. And I wanted to be a part of that, you know?
Reggae music brought this breath of fresh air of political consciousness, bawdy sexuality, certainly a praise of herb.
Reggae was clearly just taking over. I mean, it was like night and day. There were so many Jamaican bands coming in and out of California. We had bands like Black Uhuru, Peter Tosh, Steel Pulse, Third World, all the great classics, man. And those are the cats that inspired us to become who we are today as reggae musicians. It was making breakthroughs that were so heavy and so intense that it was able to seriously penetrate.
The acceptance of American reggae bands playing the music deepened the overstanding of reggae to an American audience. That led to a burgeoning festival scene, and the more festivals that are held, the wider the audience that is brought into the music.
As reggae left Jamaica and became more internationalized, it allowed us to play to a much broader audience. In 1985, along with the Third World Band, we became the first international reggae tour to come to the Big Island of Hawaii. During my time there, I had fallen under the spell of the Hawaiian Islands and decided to move there permanently. I felt Hawaii became the next frontier. I continued to write and record and perform, so taking reggae there seemed a natural part of continuing to spread the music.
Jack got this idea to put together this reggae band over here, and so we put together the Big Eye Band and started doing concerts in Kona and stuff.
Yes, no, hear this. We got the drum, we got the bass.
When I came to Hawaii, there was few, reggae people that were from California, and when I met Jack, I felt like I'd already known the guy for a long time, and that's just the way Jack is.
Check the beat, check the rhythm, check the flow,
Jack set the standard for a lot of musicians on the Big Island and all the islands, really. Obviously, there was a movement happening with Jack Miller and Big Eye, and I said, if I'm going to be part of this tapestry, I need to get my skill to the point where I can actually add something.
It just bursted open, man, to all of these connections with beautiful people and awesome musicians.
It's like a chain reaction. Through Jack, I met James and Marty. Everybody has their own separate things that they're working on and doing, but we always come back together and do some things.
That was when, when our little revolution started right here in Puna, man.
After recording and producing reggae music for nearly 30 years, I felt we had an opportunity to make some sort of significant musical statement about social change.
Music has gotten coarser, more violent.
I mean, it seems to me that the Some of the negative things that are going on in the world are like at a fever pitch.
And something gentle and forthright something harmonious needs to address that. Otherwise, we're all in a great deal of trouble.
With war profiteering, weapons of mass destruction, a disregard for the suffering of humanity. Just as the reggae pioneers were responding to the political strife and the oppression of their time, we need to come to terms with the problems that we face globally.
When I listen to what's out there portrayed in the big media, I don't hear a lot of good messages about healing the world situation. And I think it's so ripe and so due.
Marty and I had written a song called Take No Part.
It was a piece of music that Jack had composed. And I wrote what I thought him and I would both be able to say about the war in Iraq and about every war that's ever happened on this planet.
All those connections, all those people still there. So when I get a call from Jack and he says, show up, I show up because I know something good is about to happen. I love harmonizing and singing with other singers and with my girls, the Oreo Divas.
Not for sale. That's the middle part. Not for sale. You want me to sing? Not for sale.
Marty felt like Willie Nelson would be a great person to sing on this song.
I tried to write something that was going to speak for both of us. And so when he heard the lyrics and he heard the melody, he said, book the session, I'm there.
In this war that's going on, help me be. Someone told me, follow my heart, follow your heart, who'll help me make a brand new start. Won't you please?
This record brings a bunch of musical ideas, talents, backgrounds, and says here we are as an entity, a group of focused individuals from various backgrounds putting out one message, that the only way is love.
In this war that's going on, it's time for a new start.
Because this record is a part of my life, it gives me a deeper sense of purpose, because I can't speak these words and sing these songs without living it myself.
Someone told me, follow my heart, who'll help me make a brand new start.
Once we got into this project, it became obvious there had to be a return to Jamaica.
Welcome to Montego Bay. Current local time is 10:07. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelt securely fastened.
We got to the hotel in Montego Bay and immediately started making connections. Toots Hibbert happened to be staying at the same hotel, and the Third World Band was playing a concert that night in town. Later, we hooked up with Sly and Robbie, and these musicians became the nucleus of our rhythm section. There's this energy that you always have in Jamaica. You get down there, and there's a magical sense of community that seems to prosper here on this island. Well, we ended up calling the record Dreadlock Rock. Some of the tracks were recorded at Harry J's. This legendary studio where the great early golden era reggae recordings were done.
You know, these are the icons of our music, and you know, it's been a privilege for me to be working with them. It was just an experience where you see the music evolving and becoming great. We're putting this drive and this sound behind the drum and bass. It's not only just turning the knobs, it's getting creative with the knobs, you know? So this is what, you know, Jamaican producers, engineers are known for. And, you know, we pride ourselves in putting this low end and this fat sound behind the drums and the bass especially.
when you walk into this room, the spirit of these great musicians, it inspires you, it moves you, it fills you. Big Youth met us at Harry J's and even brought his son along to Far Eye, who's made a name for himself as a hip-hop rapper in Jamaica.
Yeah, I'm my father's child, so I walk the walk, and I talk the talk. He's a righteous man, I'm a righteous man, so I'm the son of a preacher man. It doesn't mean that I'm the son of a preacher man. That doesn't mean
It doesn't mean that what? Huh? It doesn't mean that what?
Doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I still do the best that I can.
It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I still do the best that I can. And I'm the tail about to put the bucket on of a preacher, man, the fuck wrong. The story is up here, you have it, Bridget.
Let us all come together and live in one nest. So did I say one nest? I mean togetherness, just like the birds in the sky had to fly together. Whether the black or the white, let's ride together. Now we all God's children, so think of the life we're living. I hope y'all see the vision, let's accomplish this mission to spread love and peace and unity, cause that's what we need to carry on. Just like they say, the weakest column make the bridge fall. We need each other in order to share the love, y'all. Too many crimes and homicides, too many mothers of crime, too many babies are dying. Now let's come together, we need world peace.
We could live together. Why can't we live together? We must live together.
Peace, love, and unity. What we need is love to guide and conquer all. Say, why can't we live together? We must live together in love, peace, and unity. Yes.
These sessions were a phenomenal success, and it reminded me of how fortunate I am to be able to work with these reggae greats that I've come to love and respect. When we sit down and write a song, it goes through a process. There's the writing, there's recording, and there's the live performances. Each stage, it gets interpreted.
Mr. Jack, that's better, no? Thanks, yeah.
It gets changed, it gets honed, it gets shaped. So the live experience is the pinnacle of the process.
Reggae means hands-on, because I could sing them all day, but if I'm not living it, it was all for nothing.
We want to take it on the road. I mean, we can go, I can lock the doors up to my house and I'm gone. That's where I'm at.
Its positive message is something that's completely and totally timeless. I mean, love for your fellow man is something that will never die.
We could live together. Why can't we live together? We must live together in love, peace, and unity. We can live together. Why can't we live together? We must live together in love, peace, and unity. Love could heal the sick, make a blind man see. Love, our salvation, sacred energy. What you get is what you see. Love, peace, and unity. When you give, you will receive. Love, peace, and unity. Yes, man. You need the love and unity in the community. For real. Who no hear? Yeah. Love could heal the sick, make a blind man see. Love, our salvation, sacred energy. Yeah. On Hope Road, we never give up on love. On Hope Road, we never give up. We never give up. On Hope Road, we never give up on love.
That's what reggae is. Okay? Complexity and simplicity, grace, tension, fragile structure, but heavy groove.